Imagine this. You look at a particle and suddenly it changes. Not because you are some kind of quantum rock star, but simply because you looked at it. Welcome to quantum physics. Now, imagine the universe is made up of 70% something no one can see, but that moves everything. Dark energy, divine intuition, a shared hallucination. This video dives into complicated matters like quantum physics, Sufism, Einstein, meditation, dark energy, and the riddle of Trump's orange skin. Okay, I promise, I solemnly swear there won't be any political pseudo jokes, probably. All counted above wrapped around one big question: what if the universe isn't just there, but only takes shape because you are here to witness it? It's going to get scientific, it's going to get spiritual, maybe esoteric, it's going to get interesting, I hope. So stay tuned. By the end, you might just find out, are you mainly watching, or have you been part of the act all along? Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is a concept from quantum physics, and it reveals something rather unexpected. We can never know both the exact position and the exact speed of a particle at the same time. Or to put it more precisely, you cannot simultaneously know the exact location and the exact momentum, for example, the state of motion of a particle. The more accurately you measure one, the less precisely you can know the other. In formula terms, it looks like this.
My English is very good. Very good. I can speak without an accent, even though I'm a Russian head.
So, what does that mean? At the quantum level, reality is fundamentally open and fuzzy. There is no complete or absolute precision. What does that mean for us? Quite simply, it implies that at its core, reality isn't entirely deterministic and classically predictable. It operates on probabilities, depends on context, and is intrinsically linked to the observer. That might sound a bit strange at first because in everyday life, it's a different story, right? If a car is driving down the road, we can just point a radar gun and say, right, it's exactly here, moving at 40 miles per hour. But what about tiny particles? That kind of precision just doesn't fly with them. Meaning, reality at the quantum level is fundamentally open and uncertain. There is no such thing as complete, precise determination. But why? Apparently, because when we measure something in the quantum world, we always end up disturbing it a little. We can't just look in from the outside without affecting what we observe, right? For example, if we try to measure the position of an electron, trying to find out exactly where it is, we have to touch it somehow, usually with light. But that light disturbs the particle, changing its speed in the process. So it's rock solid. The more precisely we want to know where a particle is, the less precisely we can know how fast it's moving, and vice versa. So let's dig a bit deeper and try to understand why the tiny world behaves so differently. To do that, we'll beam ourselves back to 1956 when physicists Song-Dan Lee and Xin-Ning Yang, I hope I got that right, proposed that so-called parity might not be conserved in weak interactions like beta decay, a form of radioactive decay. In physics, parity means that the laws of nature should be mirror symmetrical. In other words, if you look at a physical system through a mirror, left and right swapped, it should behave exactly the same as the original. Lee and Yang put forward the idea theoretically, but then, of course, they needed experimental proof, right? That's where the brilliant Chinese-American physicist Xing-Sheng Wu, the first lady of physics, came in. She was able to experimentally prove that the parity principle is violated in weak nuclear forces. That's in the world of atoms, electrons, and quarks. So what did Wu actually do? She used the radioactive isotope cobalt-60 to test whether beta decay, the process where neutron turns into proton while releasing an electron, respects that mirror symmetry. So here is how the experiment worked. Wu aligned the atomic nuclei of cobalt-60 using a strong magnetic field so all the nuclear spins pointed the same way. She then cooled everything down to near absolute zero, of course, what else? Which reduced random motion and helped keep the spins in place. Then she observed the direction in which electrons were emitted during the decay process. Now, here is the crucial part. If the laws of physics are truly mirror symmetric, even at the quantum level, then electrons should have come out equally in both directions. like a perfectly mirrored dance. Instead, the electrons were emitted preferentially in one direction, opposite the direction of the nuclear spin. That was huge. It meant that mirror symmetry was broken. In simple terms, imagine filming a spinning top, releasing sparks for whatever reason. If nature were symmetric, flipping the footage in a mirror should still look like a physically possible scene. But in Wu's experiment, the mirrored version would break the rules. It just wouldn't happen in the real world. This wasn't just a small technicality, it shattered a long standing assumption. For decades, physicists believed that nature didn't care about left, left or right. Wu's experiment showed that, at least for the weak nuclear force, nature has a preference. In everyday life, we take it for granted that things have a definite location and speed, they behave predictably thanks to classical mechanics, and they exist independently of whether or not we're observing them. So when a person dances, their reflection in the mirror still makes logical sense. Left stays left, right stays right. In the quantum world, as demonstrated by Wu's experiment, particles showed asymmetric behavior during beta decay. And that's completely counterintuitive from an everyday perspective. Reality on the smaller scale isn't just a miniaturized version of our everyday experience, it's fundamentally different. And this came as a real shock to the physics community back then. Li and Yang were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1957 for their theory, and Xingchong Wu did not receive the prize, something now widely recognized as a serious injustice. And rightly so, rightly so. My feminine heart goes to you, De Wu. But why is reality so different on the quantum level? That's a question that puzzled even Einstein and still sparks debate today. But here's a simple way to look at it. At the quantum scale, particles like electrons, for example, don't behave like tiny billiard balls. Instead, they act more like probability waves, spread out, fuzzy, and only solidify into one definite state when measured. One reason for this strange behavior is that quantum particles don't have fixed properties until we interact with them. Unlike objects in our everyday world, which exist with definite traits, whether we look at them or not, quantum particles seem to live in a state of possibility, a kind of in between existence, until they are observed. Some physicists say this is just the math of quantum mechanics at work. Others believe it hints at something deeper, that reality itself may not be fully real until it's observed. That is, the act of measurement doesn't just reveal something, it actually helps create it. This idea is deeply weird, but it's supported by experiments like the famous double slit experiment, where particles behave like waves when observed, but suddenly act like particles when someone watches. It's like nature changes the story depending on whether there is an audience or not. There are different interpretations why this happens. The Copenhagen interpretation, the most mainstream one, says quantum systems exist in a superposition, aka multiple possibility or multiple possible states until observed. The many worlds interpretation says all possible outcomes happen just in separate branching universes, and others suggest particles have hidden variables we just don't know about yet. So bottom line is, quantum reality is different not because it's broken or chaotic, but because it plays by different rules. It's a world based on potential, not certainty, on context, not absolutes. And we only ever see one version of the story when we go to check. Still, let's stare and try to draw an analogy from everyday life. Even though, as mentioned, quantum physics doesn't directly map onto the microscopic world, imagine this. You are secretly observing someone from a distance with a camera. If you stay far away, they won't notice you. You don't disturb them, but your footage might be blurry or unclear. If you move closer, the image sharpens, but now they sense they're being watched and their behavior changes. My goodness, I literally hate this example. They might stop, look around, or even walk away. I'm still hating it. So you wanted to observe their true behavior, but by getting closer, you change it. You tried to measure, and the act of measuring altered the result. Here is another example. You are standing on the street, and a red car zooms past you. You think, a red Volkswagen. Well, he was moving so fast you couldn't tell how fast it was going. Now suppose you use a radar gun to measure its speed. To do that, you need to focus so precisely that you might miss the color or model altogether. The more accurately you learn one thing, the less you know about the other. Still, remember. So why does this matter? Because the uncertainty principle isn't just about particles, it changes the way we think about the world. In the past, many believed that if we could just measure things thoroughly enough, we'd eventually know everything. Quantum physics says there are limits. And those limits aren't just technological, they are fundamental. It seems like almost nature itself refuses to let us know everything at once. Sufism, mystical openness, and non duality. So, in quantum mechanics, Werner Heisenberg showed that it's fundamentally impossible to know both the exact position and the exact momentum of particle at the same time. As we've already discussed, this isn't just a technical issue with our instruments, it's a core feature of reality itself. The more precisely we know one aspect, the less precisely we know the other. And that's quite a hard pill to swallow. The quantum world really seems so different as if it isn't part of our world at all. In Sufism, the mystical tradition within Islam, the ultimate reality, let me get it, al-haq, can't be grasped by reason alone. It transcends rational thought and calls for a deeper kind of knowing, one of the heart, rooted in surrender, experience, and transformation. And this is where fascinating parallels between Heisenberg's physics and Sufism begin to emerge. The limits of objective knowledge. Heisenberg goes like, we can't know all the properties of a system simultaneously within full precision. Sufism, the divine can't be fully comprehended through intellect alone. So truth demands we acknowledge the limits of our understanding. The role of the observer. Quantum physics, the observer influences the outcome of the experiment. Sufism, the inner state of the seeker shapes the depth of their encounter with the divine. So, observer and the observed are deeply entangled. Hiddenness and mystery. The uncertainty principle reveals a world where concealment is woven into the fabric of reality. Sufi tradition speaks of zahir, the outer appearance, and batin, the hidden, the inner truth. Reality is layered, veiled, and mysterious. Knowledge is an unveiling process, a journey through those layers. Beyond duality, quantum theory collapses classical opposites, wave and particle, not one or other. Sufism transcends the divide between self and the divine. The ego dissolves into the one. Understanding requires a radical, unified way of seeing. Science and spirituality might seem worlds apart, but both, it turns out, point us toward humbling and astonishing insight. Reality isn't as solid or separate as we thought. It responds, it conceals, it transforms, depending on how and who is looking. To sum it all up, quantum physics, Heisenberg, the observer influences what is being observed. There are fundamental limits to what can be measured. Reality is probabilistic and partially hidden. The act of measurement disturbs the system. Sufism. The seeker's inner state shapes their perception of the divine. There are limits to knowledge without purification of the heart. Truth is veiled and must be experienced, not just analyzed. The ego obstructs the presence of the divine. So, both Heisenberg's physics and the mysticism of Sufism challenge that illusion of total control or absolute understanding. Both call for humility, awareness, and some sort of reverence in the face of the mystery of existence. And there is so much more across religions and philosophies, that resonates deeply with what modern science is uncovering. That to me is what's truly fascinating. Chapter 2, The Limits of Science and Logic. In 1931, along comes a young Austrian mathematician, no painter, but in his own way, very much of an artist by the name of Kurt Gödel. And he essentially says math is boring, and that's exactly why. In any consistent formal system that's powerful enough to describe basic arithmetic, there will always be true statements that can't be proven within that system. Boom, that landed. Mathematics, long seen as the most precise, logical, rock solid, scrumptious of all the sciences, suddenly had limits. And not the kind of limits you can fix with a better computer, for example, or some smarter formula. No, fundamental limits. Here is a simple way to picture it. Imagine you've got a dictionary and you look up the word dictionary and it says, see dictionary. So you are stuck in a loop. You don't actually get anywhere. That's exactly what Gödel showed can happen in maths. There are statements that are true, provably true in a sense, but the system itself just can't prove them. They're like a knot you can't untie using your own hands, even though you know the knot is real. What Gödel proved was radical. There is no all-knowing, all-explaining formula, no ultimate super system that can account for everything, even in mathematics. So, what does that mean for science as a whole? Well, the question naturally leads us to a deeper one. What is science actually? A simple yet rather elegant definition inspired by my beloved physicist Sabine Hossenfelder goes like this. Science is a method for predicting the future. Sounds almost like fortune telling, doesn't it? But here is the key difference. Science relies on observation, measurement, and experiment, sure. Still, the goal is the same, to make reliable predictions about what's to come. So science is a tool too. A powerful one, no doubt. We owe it electricity, space travel, modern medicine, and unfortunately, TikTok. And really, nearly everything that shapes our daily lives today. But science is not all powerful. It can't answer every question like, what's the meaning of life? It can't prove everything, every truth. Hello, Gödel. It can't measure everything. Hello, Heisenberg. And sometimes it simply has to say, we don't know yet. And that's okay, because those limits are exactly what makes science honest. A good scientist doesn't claim to own the truth, right? They say, this is what we know for now, and we're still working on the rest. Back in the day, people believed the Earth is at the center of the universe, right? The sun, the stars, everything revolves around us. That wasn't just a religious belief, it was also standard science at the time, backed by respected thinkers like Ptolemy. And to be fair, it sort of worked. You could do the maths and get decent predictions for that. Then along came Nicolaus Copernicus, who said, hang on, guys, what if it's the other way around? What if the Earth actually goes around the sun? And so on. An absolutely mind blowing idea at the time. And what happened? Lots of people refused to believe it, of course, because it sounded completely mad back then. The church pushed back because challenged the established order, whatever. And science, well, it had no hard proof yet, just better calculations. Only later, with Galileo, Kepler, and Newton, did it become clear. Copernicus was right, which goes to show even scientific truth can change. What feels solid today may look totally different tomorrow. All these limits and cracks in our worldviews remind us science isn't the end of thinking, it's often the beginning of wonder. And exactly where our tools fail, actually, where our models wobble, that's where space opens up. Not a space for nonsense, of course, but a space for meaning, a space for the kinds of questions humans have always asked. Why am I here? Where am I going? Is there more than what we can see? Am I a trembling creature, or do I have the right? Where's the money, Lebowski? Who killed Kenny? Science explains a lot. It has its limits. Again, look at quantum physics, those quantum fluctuations we talked about. Completely unpredictable. Even quantum mechanics is basically saying, sorry, folks, you can't know everything. But maybe that's not a flaw. Maybe it's just a feature. Maybe it's a good thing that science doesn't explain it all, because That's where the real adventure begins. That's when people start pulling tarot cards, runes, bones, bits of pumice, or any other item from their velvet pouches of mysteries, and try to do the very thing science itself is built for, to make a prediction. Personally, I have no problem with divination. To me, it's the same, as you can guess. At the end of the day, it's basically the same thing, just using different tools to draw information out of the unified field surrounding us all. And just like with science, nothing is set in stone. You really can't predict everything. Not with quantum models and not with tarot cards either. And maybe that's exactly where humility comes in. It's like in Jungian psychology, humility isn't about self deprecation or low self esteem. Instead, it's about acknowledging one's limitations and the vastness of the unconscious, including the shadow side of the personality. And to me, unconscious, it is the universe. It's a necessary part of individuation, the deep psychological process of self realization. And that requires facing the unknown, aka universe, confronting paradox, and integrating the parts of ourselves we often overlook or deny. In that sense, uncertainty isn't something to fear. It's a doorway. So thank you, Herr Gödel and Herr Heisenberg. Thank you, Sufism. A bit of humility now and then, not such a bad thing. Even very helpful, actually, when we dive into the next topic. Chapter 3: What we can't see. After Copernicus, Albert Einstein came along and flipped our understanding of space and time all over again. Before Einstein, the idea was pretty straightforward. Time is absolute. It ticks the same for everyone, like a cosmic grandfather clock ticking away in the background of the universe. But Einstein said time is relative. In short, how fast time passes depends on how fast you're moving and where you are in space. For instance, how strong gravity is around you at the moment. So let's break it down with a simple thought experiment. Imagine this: you board a spaceship. You travel through space at nearly the speed of light for 10 years, let's say. That's 10 years for you. You eat, sleep, listen to weird cosmic podcasts. Then one day you come back to Earth. You step out of your lovely ship, and suddenly someone says to you, "Welcome back." I don't know, I'm pretty sure that English will still be the global language. Welcome back, but here on Earth, 50 years have passed. Your friends are old now, and you can't even get paralytic with them to celebrate your coming back at a pub. My friends can't do this even now. Life after 30s, unbelievable. But you've only experienced 10 years. Sounds like science fiction, doesn't it? But this is real physics. It's been measured repeatedly. For example, using atomic clocks on planes and satellites. Even the GPS on your phone has to account for these effects, or it wouldn't work properly, because GPS satellites orbit Earth at high speeds and at higher altitudes. The clocks tick slightly differently compared to clocks here on the ground due to both their speed and weaker gravity. If these tiny time differences weren't corrected, GPS calculations would drift by several kilometers every day, making your location inaccurate. Here is another example. Imagine you've got an identical twin. You stay on Earth, your twin goes off on a journey through space at nearly the speed of light again. When you meet again years later, you'll be older than your twin, even though you were born on the same day. That's called the twin paradox. And no, it's not a magic trick. It's the result of time not being a fixed thing. Time isn't what we thought. Einstein showed us time isn't some invisible ruler ticking away in the background, the same everywhere. It's something woven together with with the space itself, like a kind of cosmic fabric that can be bent, stretched, or ripple. That's why we talk today about space-time, a four-dimensional web in which everything moves. And depending on where you are and how fast you're moving, the rhythm of time itself can change. And what does that mean for us? Well, time is an absolute. The universe doesn't tick like a universal clock. Our experience of time is relative, it's personal even. So maybe the phrase, "I don't have time," is more profound than we thought. Maybe it's not about the hours we lack, but about the strange shifting nature of time itself. Because there isn't just one single universal time, right? Every person, every particle, every object has its own time depending on its own point of view, so to say. And now we are drifting into the philosophical realm. So is time even real, or is it just an illusion, a kind of side effect of moving through space time? Einstein himself once said, after the death of a friend, for us, believing physicists, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. Or as physicist Sabine Hossenfelder, I'm sorry again, put it so beautifully, then all our past selves and grandparents are alive the same way our present selves are. They're all there in a four-dimensional space-time, have always been there, and will always be there. That's one of those moments where science of all things gives me a surprising sense of comfort and even brings a quiet smile to my face. As if to say, maybe nothing is ever truly lost. And who knows, maybe this is only the beginning. Maybe time is not only relative, but in some dimensions of reality, it may behave in ways that we can't even imagine yet. And maybe there's more out there, something that is, even if it's not easily grasped. Oh, yes, at least a couple of things. Dark energy, the invisible engine of the cosmos. So here is the deal. The universe isn't just expanding, it's speeding up. Galaxies aren't just drifting apart like friends after high school. They are actually racing away from each other faster and faster, as if something is pushing them. And scientists were like, that shouldn't be happening actually. So they gave this mystery a name, dark energy. Sounds like a Scandinavian metal goth band. And now hold on to your snack. Dark energy makes up about 70% of the entire universe. Let that sink in. 70% of everything out there, of everything that exists, we can't see it. We can't touch it. We have zero clue what it actually is, but we feel its effect. Galaxies are drifting apart faster than gravity should allow. So something has to be behind that. A kind of cosmic repellent, an anti-gravity that's stretching space itself. And the wildest part, without this invisible pressure, the universe would behave totally differently. It would maybe slow down, collapse back in, or at least chill out a bit. But nope, it's out there, humming in the background, like a low bass line in a track you didn't realize was there, moving everything without being seen. Isn't that crazy? That's nuts. Consciousness, the greatest magic trick of all. So, what's consciousness anyway? Is it that strange little voice that says I am? It thinks, feels, scrolls the feed, gets secondhand embarrassment watching this video. It's experiencing this moment right now. But real talk, where is it actually? Which corner of your brain is your self hiding in? The prefrontal cortex? Somewhere behind your ears, tucked between your neurons? Yeah, we can track brain activity. We see neurons fire and wire. We map thought patterns. But the raw experience, the insideness of it all, the meanness of being you, that can't be seen under a microscope. You can study a kidney, you can transplant a heart, but you can't put someone's consciousness on a table and say, there's you, John. And once again, like with dark energy, here's the same pattern, something undeniably real that we can't grab hold of. We know it must be there because without it, there would be no curiosity, no joy, no heartbreak, no science, no poetry, no wine, nothing. No one to even ask these damn questions in the first place. Intuition, feelings, dreams, real or just made up. When you feel I should take this path, even though there is no evidence, when you love someone, even if you can't explain why, when you have a dream that stays with you for years, are those just brain blips, just neurons doing their thing? Or is there more? We can't measure this stuff, but it moves us, sometimes more than facts even could. Maybe the things that really carry us through life are exactly the ones that can't be measured. Science shows us a lot, but clearly not everything. It really seems like the most important things are the ones we can't touch, prove, or even fully see. And still, deep down, We know they're real, like trust or hope or love again. Well, time, dark energy, consciousness. Maybe the universe is full of things we don't understand yet. And maybe that's not terrifying. Maybe it's actually kind of beautiful because that's where the wonder starts. Chapter 4, Observer, Creator. Quantum physics already showed us observation changes what is. A particle doesn't have a fixed state until someone looks at it. Only when you measure it, it decides is it there or there, is it a wave or point. It sounds crazy, yeah, we've been through that, but it's measurable and it leads to a massive question. If observing changes reality, then maybe you're not just someone looking at the world. Maybe you are someone co creating it. Too spiritual? Maybe, but also kind of logical. When you meet someone with love, something shifts. When you are afraid, you see the world through that lens of fear and you act out. When you radiate trust, life often responds with lightness, and maybe that's creation in action. You're not just watching the world, you are affecting it with your attention, with your mindset, with the way you think. In any case, observer is part of the system. That much is clear in the quantum world. Just by observing, we influence what happens. We're not passive bystanders, we are part of the play. Physics itself starts to sound esoteric, and that opens up a whole can of philosophical worms. If we change what we observe, how objective is our knowledge really? Can we ever observe something without affecting it, or is that feature just not included in the program? It all reminds me of that famous Zen koan from Buddhism. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? On the surface, it sounds simple. Of course, falling trees make sound waves, even if no one hears them, right? But the real question goes deeper. Sound for us is an experience. If no one perceives it, is it still sound? So the question isn't just physical, it's philosophical. Is there a reality that exists independent of consciousness? Or is reality defined by perception? Maybe reality isn't just what's out there. Maybe it's what happens between subject and object. Subject and object. When we see, hear, feel, possibility becomes reality. That's exactly what the quantum world suggests. Particles don't take on a defined state until they're observed. So maybe the world isn't just there. Maybe with every glance, every thought, every feeling, it's being reshaped just a little. And that brings us right back to the beginning. Observer, creator, maybe not in a magical sense, but definitely in a phenomenological one, which leads us, of course, to our next topic, quantum meditation. Can you use meditation to actively change your life by observing it differently? Short answer, no. No. Visualization techniques, quantum leaps, manifesting vibes, and all that, sadly, they don't influence the quantum realm at all. Why? Well, because simply put, they're playing in totally different leagues, something we already touched on earlier in this video. As physicist Sabine Hossenfelder, yes, I just love her, puts it in her book Existential Physics, quantum effects don't play a role beyond the size of molecules, which honestly says a lot. Also, to trigger even the tiniest quantum fluctuation, you need an absurd amount of energy. A transformation a la I'm drowning in debt, and then I'm eating caviar of Scarlett Johansson's hip bones would require you so much energy. You would have to meditate until you turn green in your face and then more on the top, possibly. But it's just it won't die. And yeah, it has helped a lot of people. So what's going on? Why are there actual measurable effects from these practices? Because here's the kicker. It's not bullshit. In 2015, neuroscientist Yian Tang and colleagues ran a fascinating study that showed in black and white what's really going on in the brains of people who meditate. And the setup, super simple, which made the results all the more impressive. Participants, none of whom had any meditation experience, were split into two groups. One group went through an 8-week program in something called integrative body mind training, not transformation training. And the other group put on a wait list, no incense, no chanting, no Om Navam Shivayam, nothing. Quick sidebar, in loads of psychology studies, researchers use what's called a waitlist control group. Basically, these folks don't get the intervention yet. In this case, no meditation, no training, no coaching, but they'll get it later. Why? Two big reasons. Of course, comparability. You get to compare the effects of meditation against a group that's identical in every other way, age, background, expectation, but didn't meditate. And secondly, ethics. At the end of the study, the control group still gets access to the same program. Much fairer than just leaving them hanging forever, which is nice. I mean, ethics are nice, always. Now, here's the juicy bit. Before and after the 8-week training period, both groups had their brains scanned using fMRI, of course, and what they found in the meditators' heads was nothing short of a fireworks show. After just a few weeks of meditation, there were clear signs of stronger connections in brain regions responsible for focus, emotional regulation, and self control. Changes in big player here, the anterior cingulate cortex. Basically, you're in a bouncer, making sure things stay cool and under control. Positive changes, of course. And also more white matter, hence better neural wiring. Stronger highways between thoughts. Loving it. Oh, and a drop in cortisol, that delightful stress hormone that turns traffic jams and tax returns into existential crises. So, meditation literally changes your brain's structure and function, and not just in the brains of monks with over 10,000 hours of meditating experience, but also in regular tax paying folks with almost laundry and push notifications. So, if this is nothing to do with all that quantum wibbly wobblies, why does it work so well? The answer: neurobiology. Your brain is an absolutely stunning, squishy, self rewiring miracle. Meditation is a beautiful visualization tool and it genuinely helps shift things, but not because you are manifesting parallel timelines. It works because your brain is plastic, not like plastic, of course, but neuroplastic. It rewires itself based on what you imagine, think, and repeat and feel. Once your brain knows the path to a goal, it's like that goal is already half done. If your brain internalize, for example, the feeling of abundance, it gets familiar with it. And since biological systems love homeostasis, aka keeping things stable, your nervous system wants the outer world to match that inner state. You probably had that one friend in school, not smarter than you, maybe even less curious, but they came from a stable, wealthy home, right? And somehow things just clicked for them. No big drama, no hustle, panic, just sip success. And it's not just vibes, it's data. In a landmark 2014 study by Raj Chetty and his team at Harvard Opportunity Insights, researchers found that kids from wealthy households had a significantly higher chance of long term success. Wow, mom, I told you. And that was independent of IQ, grades, or grit. You can take a closer look at this study using the link in the description below, by the way. It's interesting. But why? Go on, take a wild guess. Who's to blame again? Cue dramatic music and your inner therapist whispering, external locus of control. Yeah, it's your brain. Because your brain learns early on what's normal, what normal feels like, and then spends the rest of your life trying to recreate that vibe. Neurobiologists call it homeostasis, like stability at any cost. So your system, in this case, your brain, doesn't care about you dreaming of becoming a billionaire, digital nomad with 6 apps and no email. It just wants to maintain what it already knows. So if you grew up surrounded by safety and money, your brain files that under this is the baseline. And here is where neuroplasticity gets spicy. Your brain is constantly reshaping itself, building and reinforcing connections that match your internal reality. If you've internalized the belief that success is normal, your brain literally filters the world through that lens. You see more opportunities, you act with more confidence, you bounce back faster, not because of magic, but because your entire neural network is whispering, oh, this checks out, let's go. So, in other words, you attract what feels like home, even if that home is chaos or hustle or scarcity, not because you like it, but because your brain's like, oh yeah, we know this rhythm, let's stay there. Very chill, no surprises, let's survive. So, want to change your life? You don't need quantum leaps. It's not even working, as I said up there. You need a new neurological definition of home. So, here is the deal, plain and simple. Let me just get quick through that. When you actively visualize, you literally build new neural connections. You are training your brain to get used to the thing you want to achieve. But wait, there is a crucial piece to this puzzle: feelings. Feelings pack way more energy, psychologically speaking, of course, than plain thoughts. And they get processed in the oldest and scientifically proven strongest part of your brain, the limbic system. Mind these two words. I will be repeating them so often you will start hating me. Fun fact: the limbic system stays active even while you're asleep. It handles emotions even when you are dreaming. So, are you getting me? It's always on. What about our thoughts? Well, they happen up in the prefrontal cortex, the youngest, often overwhelmed newbie in the brain town. This is the thinking brain, and the thinking brain is the latest update in our evolutionary project development. But it's kind of funny, right? No wonder there are so many idiots out there. So here's the kicker: our feelings live in a way more powerful brain region and therefore have way more influence. All hail the limbic system. Think about the time you made a decision in anger, one you later regretted, of course. Where was your logic then? Exactly, in the prefrontal cortex, probably checked out on vacation. The limbic system took over the stage, and sometimes it turns into a full on stand up comedy show. Unfortunately, not always with standing ovations. What I'm getting at is, if you bring feelings into your visualization, meditation, like joy, trust, gratitude, love, the change happens even faster because emotions are the language of your limbic brain. So if you do it right, you can actually make big leaps. But again, these aren't quantum leaps, they are genuine, profound neurobiological leaps. Pascal's wager reloaded. First, a quick question: are you God? Maybe not the all powerful mastermind of the cosmos. Like when talking about me, I'm not even mastermind of my daily to dos. But maybe you are mini co creator, single pixel in the divine code. Not the whole picture, but a part of it, a tiny one part of it, a living part, like painting. Every color counts. Like an orchestra, every note makes a difference. What if the universe is a massive creative process and you are right in the middle of it? Not just a spectator, but a player, not just there, but active and effective. Like when you look at the quantum particle and through this you change the reality. Once you become aware of something, you can change it. Or as Carl Gustav Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. By the way, the unconscious also lives deep in the limbic system and it can become conscious through awareness. I warned you about that one limbic system part. I warned you. For decades, many scientists and philosophers have tried to figure out where belief actually lives. And it turns out, yep, the limbic system again. That's responsible for the formation of archetypes and belief in something supernatural or in anything. That leads to an interesting thought. Maybe belief itself isn't something irrational, but rather something deeply natural, something that's typically human. Like I mentioned before, the prefrontal cortex, the seat of our conscious thinking, is actually a pretty late evolutionary addition to our species. An evolutionary add on, you could say. Can we just switch off one of the oldest settings in our brain just because we didn't see God sitting on the throne when we looked up at the stars. I don't think that's necessary. On the contrary, it might even be a disadvantage. And one of my personal reasons for that is a wager. The 17th century French philosopher Blaise Pascal came up with a pretty clever thought experiment. He said, super simplified, it's smarter to believe in God because if he exists, you win everything. And if not, you're fucked. Sounds like a deal with the heaven, right? But actually, it's a bet on possibility. I believe in God and he exists, I win. I believe in God and he doesn't exist, I don't win, but I don't lose either. I don't believe in God and he exists, I lose. I don't believe in God and he doesn't exist, I don't win, but I don't lose either. So Pascal's wager isn't an argument for God's existence. It's an argument for belief purely on utilitarian grounds. Basically, belief as safety net. Best case scenario, jackpot. Worst case, no loss. So I'm not saying you have to believe, but maybe it's smart to stay open because, as we've seen a few times today, there is more than just matter, more than what's visible or measurable, more than numbers, data, and formulas, and clear limits to what we can know. Imagine you have an old radio. Turn the dial, and suddenly there's music, there's sounds, voices. You don't see them, but they are there. They've always been there, playing all along. You just needed the right device to pick them up. What if life works the same way? Maybe that more is already here. Maybe we just need a different antenna. I'm the antenna catching vibration. Because when you open yourself to the possibility that there is something more, something deeper, something unseen, things start to shift. You get quieter, but more alert. You listen better, inside and out. You start noticing little signs, coincidences, synchronicities, moments that feel more than random. You feel connected, maybe to life itself. You get into that legendary flow. And if it turns out there is nothing more, then you still lived with more awareness, more depth. You searched, and searching changes you. So here's my version of Pascal's wager. It's smart to consider the possibility that there is more than meets the eye. Because when we open ourselves, doors open too, inside us, around us, and for us. Let me close this little video with a letter from Einstein to his friend Maurice Soloway. You find it strange that I view the comprehensibility of the world, to the extent we are entitled to speak of such a thing, as a miracle or an eternal mystery. Well, a priori, one should expect a chaotic world which cannot be grasped by the mind in any way. We should expect the world to be lawful only to the extent that we impose order, like alphabetizing words in a dictionary. But the kind of order revealed by Newton's theory of gravitation is entirely different. Although the axioms of the theory are human inventions, the success of such an effort presupposes a high degree of order in the objective world, which we had no right to expect. That is the miracle that grows ever more apparent as our knowledge develops. The positivists and professional atheists consider this a weakness. They feel triumphant in having banished the gods and the miracles from the world. Strange, you must be content to acknowledge the miracle without any legitimate way of avoiding it. I emphasize this so you don't think that in old age I've fallen prey to the clergy. That the world is knowable, that our minds can understand it at all, that, Einstein said, is a miracle. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest mystery isn't whether we'll solve everything, but that we can even ask the questions. That we, tiny beings on a floating rock in a space, can wonder, can search, and find patterns in the chaos. Maybe the point isn't to understand it all, but to never stop marveling at the parts we don't. So if even Einstein could say there's more between heaven and earth, then maybe it's not a contradiction to science, but its most beautiful companion. Thanks for watching. Thanks for thinking. Stay curious, stay open, and don't lose your sense of wonder.